Good evening. My name is Professor Gordon Gordsley, and tonight's tale of terror is called The Gourd Keeper. Many visitors to our town ask about the derelict old mansion on the hill. It is a distinctive stone ruin from the 19th century known as Twippington Hall. It has scarcely been inhabited at all for many years, but there have been intermittent attempts by several individuals to restore the hall and live in it. I personally interviewed a man by the name of Phineas Warbat, who tried to inhabit Twippington Hall but failed. I will now relate his terrible tale to you. I was a young man, barely 20 years of age, back in 35. I was in Paris, ostensibly studying architecture at the time, but really I was sowing my wild oats with abandon. One day, I received a telegram that said my Aunt Penelope had died some months before, and that, as her sole heir, I would be inheriting her late residence, Twippington Hall. Now, I hadn't heard from Aunt Penelope since I went abroad, but the last time she visited our home, she related that she had purchased the hall with the intention of making it a young ladies' academy. The telegram said that I should come immediately to settle business of the will and claim my property. Loath as I was to leave gay Paris, I thought it best to comply. I figured that such a large hall would be the perfect place to fill with my debauched artist friends and all manner of loose women. And if it was dull, well, I could sell it and make my way back across the ocean for more good times. Little did I know. When I arrived at the station, I was met by a very tall, thin old man who looked not unlike a skeleton. One of his eyes was milky white, but the look in his good eye was even more unsettling. In as few words as possible, he revealed himself to be Mr. Grimes, the caretaker of the hall, and with the shocking strength of an ox, he hoisted my steamer trunk into a waiting automobile. As soon as I spied the hulking stone ruin that was Twippington Hall, I shuddered involuntarily. A great iron gate stretched in front of it, and in the ironwork was a strange symbol. It was round and bulbous at one end, but with a goose-like neck attached to it. I could not discern the meaning, and I was about to ask Grimes, but he hopped out of the automobile in order to open the gate before I could begin to ask the question. The gates made an unholy groan as they opened, and my uneasiness prevented me from saying another word to Grimes as we drove up to the house. The roofline was adorned with gargoyles of a most grotesque nature, too horrible to describe. Some of the windows were boarded over, and a number of shutters seemed about to fall off of their hinges. Dark vines slithered up toward the stone parapets like serpents. After a few moments, I realized that Grimes was staring at me with his good eye rather impatiently as he held open the massive medieval wooden door. I entered and was greeted by a small, stooped old woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Gowell. She hardly spoke above a whisper. She showed me to my aunt's room, which she said she had prepared with fresh linen and told me she would be happy to bring my supper as soon as I settled in. I requested a little bread, cheese, and wine, and installed myself in front of the fire. The room was exceedingly sparse, with little in the way of furniture, not unlike a convent. It was very odd, considering Aunt Penelope had once been known for her ostentatious fashions. Perhaps she had fallen on hard times at the end, I thought, as I surveyed the room's main decoration, a large ironwork wall hanging depicting the same strange symbol that had appeared on the gates. I gazed at it and discerned that it could be a fruit or a vegetable, perhaps a squash. Presently Mrs. Gal brought me sustenance and wine, and I drank up the contents of the bottle. A fierce rain began to fall upon the grounds, lashing the windows, while the howling winds rattled the panes. I could see nothing outside but inky darkness. I took my wine bottle before the fire and was thankful to be indoors. The old place was very gloomy, but the warmth of the wine and the flames soon bore me off to contented slumber. I awoke in the middle of the night to a rhythmic clunk sounding upon the flagstones outside. The rain had lessened, but a flash of lightning told me that the storm still raged. Perhaps it had been a peal of thunder and nothing more. I rolled over stiffly, regretting very much that I had fallen asleep upon the room's lone rug. I rose and shuffled over toward the Spartan bedstead, when a great bolt of lightning illuminated the ground with great quivering windows. I saw a dark figure moving up the lane away from the house. It appeared to be human, but lurched unnaturally. Just as quickly, all was again in darkness. My blood froze. I could hear the crunch of gravel growing fainter in the same unusual rhythm. Had some marauder come to burgle my new estate? I determined that I would catch him. With some effort on account of the wine I had consumed, I pulled on my boots. There was a small lantern on the bedside table, which I lit and took with me. I ran through the drafty corridor and out at the great front door. No moon or stars were visible to guide me as I stumbled over the flagstones and into the lane. I could see almost nothing, and nearly lost my footing on some large rock, but I recovered and went forth purposefully. A thick fog made my progress even more difficult, but I persevered. Suddenly, as lightning flashed, I saw the figure dimly through the mist, entering what appeared to be a pasture. I quickened my pace and set off toward him. As I moved from the gravel lane to the field of grass, the mud slowed my boots. But being a young man, it did not slow me too much. I lost sight of the figure until the next bolt of the lightning, when I saw that he was not 10 yards away. He had stopped, with his back turned to me. "Halt!" I shouted. "Who are you?" I approached slowly and saw that the figure was in a dark-colored robe. He turned toward me slightly but did not reveal his face. I could see that he was holding a large staff of some kind, or perhaps it was his intended weapon. I cursed myself for not having the forethought to bring some kind of weighty object with which I might fight back. He was silent for what seemed like forever. But finally, he spoke. "I am the Gourd Keeper." His voice was terrible, a low rasp that made me shudder to my core. With a slow, unearthly motion, he struck his staff against the ground, and it rumbled. The earth itself began to glow beneath our feet, taking on a sickening greenish cast. A horrible chanting sound began to emanate from the Gourd Keeper. I did not understand the language of the chant, but it paralyzed me with fear. I have never heard something more sinister in all my days. He lifted his staff and pointed it away from me. I saw that the entire field below was full of gourds, hideous gourds, glimmering like a serpent's scales, pulsating with an unknown energy, and chanting, yes, chanting in a chorus of thousands, responding to the Gourd Keeper's fearsome incantation. It sounded as if the chant were in my very brain itself, and I began to feel myself going completely mad with it. The noise was all-consuming, and I soon submitted to it. Suddenly, I could understand the chant of the gourds. They were inviting me to join them in the ground. All I had to do was lower myself into the mud beside the gourds, and all would be well. I staggered forward, submitting to the call of the gourds. I got closer and closer, close enough to see the terrifying bumps and ridges of their flesh. I knelt and buried my hands in the disgusting soil among the gourds. I had become insensible to anything, and so had dropped my lantern on its side. The flame leapt up and singed my moustache, somehow breaking the spell I was under. I yelped in pain and scrambled to my feet. "Stop!" I screamed at the top of my voice. I staggered away from the gourd patch, trying to run. The Gourd Keeper was soon at arm's length from me. As he turned his awful figure toward me, a flash of lightning illuminated the hollow beneath his hooded robe, and I saw, to my horror, that where there should be human flesh, there was instead the slick, bumpy flesh of a gourd. Here Mr. Warbat could not continue. He had lived most of his life in an asylum, his mind ravaged by what he had seen that night. No other persons living who have stayed in Twippington Hall are willing to speak about what they saw there. But I feel I must warn you. The Gourd Keeper may still be out there.